That was what Nadia noticed first. It spun off the oak tree near the school gate and drifted sideways, straight into the hand of the new student standing underneath it. He did not reach for it. He did not even look up. The leaf simply landed in his open palm like it had been invited. He stood there holding it, studying it with the kind of attention most people reserved for very important letters. Then he set it down gently on the gate post and walked into school. Nadia wrote that down in her notebook. She wrote down everything. His name was Soren Vale. The office said he had transferred from overseas. Nobody knew exactly where. The form listed a city that the school secretary had to look up, and even then she was not entirely sure she found the right one. He was tall for 15. His hair was dark and slightly too neat, like someone had read a description of how students wore their hair and followed the instructions precisely. His eyes were a color that Nadia could not name, not brown, not gold, something in between that shifted depending on which way the light fell. He sat down in the back row of homeroom and immediately became very still. Not bored still, not tired still, the kind of still that predators have, or astronomers, the kind of stillness that comes from paying very close attention to something while pretending not to. Nadia sat 2 rows ahead and watched him in the reflection of the window. He was looking at everyone, one by one, slowly, not staring, nothing rude, just observing, like a person taking inventory. When Ms. Aldridge called roll and reached his name, he said "here" in a voice that was quiet and very clear and slightly too formal, like someone who had learned the word from a book rather than from growing up saying it. At lunch, Reuben Walsh dropped his entire tray. Reuben dropped things regularly. It was almost a talent. Today it was a bowl of soup and 2 bread rolls and a cup of juice, and the whole arrangement hit the floor in a spectacular way that made half the cafeteria look up. Soren was 3 tables away. He was on his feet before the tray finished clattering, and he had the bread rolls in his hands before Reuben had even crouched down to help. He moved fast, very fast. Then he seemed to remember himself, and he slowed, and he handed Reuben the rolls with an expression that was carefully neutral. "Thank you," Reuben said, a little stunned. "You are welcome," Soren said. Reuben blinked. "You are welcome, not you're welcome, huh?" Soren looked at him for a moment. "Is that wrong?" "No," Reuben said. "It is just very polite." He grinned. "I am Reuben." Something happened in Soren's expression then, something small and genuine that did not quite match the careful blankness he had been wearing all morning. "I am Soren," he said. They sat together at lunch. Reuben talked about the soup, the school, the football team's losing streak, and the particular unfairness of the vending machine that took money without giving anything back. Soren listened to all of it with complete attention, the way someone listens to music they have never heard before and are trying to understand. In biology, Ms. Aldridge asked the class to name the primary function of the Golgi apparatus. Nobody answered. This happened every day. The class had an informal agreement with silence. "The Golgi apparatus packages and ships proteins to where they need to go," Soren said from the back row. His voice was still quiet, informative, not showing off. Ms. Aldridge looked up. "That is correct, thank you." "The textbook says it also modifies proteins during transport," Soren continued, "but it does not explain what guides the destination signal. Is that a gap in the current model or something the chapter leaves out deliberately?" Ms. Aldridge stared at him. The class stared at him. Soren looked back, apparently unaware that this was not how biology class worked. "That is a very good question," Ms. Aldridge said slowly. "The honest answer is that it is partly both." After class, Nadia caught up with Soren in the hallway. She opened her notebook to a fresh page. "I write for the school paper," she said. "I do a piece on new students sometimes. Can I ask you a few questions?" He looked at her notebook, then at her. "What kind of questions?" "Easy ones," she said. "What do you think of Haverfield so far?" He considered this seriously, the way someone might consider a very complicated maths problem. "It is louder than I expected," he said, "but the noise has patterns. It is not random. People are always talking towards something, even when they do not realize it. Nadia wrote that down. She also wrote, does not blink at normal rate. Hands no cold, even near the window. Moved too fast in cafeteria. Knew the answer and then asked a better question. She underlined the last one twice. On his way home, Soren walked slowly past the oak tree and picked up the leaf he had set on the gate post that morning. He turned it over in his fingers. 3 months the mission plan said, observe, document, do not engage beyond necessity, leave no trace. He put the leaf in his pocket. He was not sure. He was very good at leaving no trace. 3 weeks in, and Soren had learned several things about Haverfield Secondary School. He had learned that the third stair from the bottom near the east wing creaked so loudly that students used it as a warning system. He had learned that the teacher called Mr. Doyle always marked essays on Tuesdays and was slightly more generous with grades before his third coffee. He had learned that Reuben Walsh ate the same lunch every day, not because he liked it, but because choosing was hard when you were already spending all your energy on other things. The other thing was reading. Soren had noticed it in week 1. The way Reuben's pen moved in class, copying things down slowly, letter by letter, like he was translating a foreign language. The way his eyes moved across a page, not left to right, but jumping, backtracking, hunting. The way he laughed loudest when he was most nervous. It was a Thursday when it became impossible to ignore. The English teacher, Mr. Hall, asked students to read a paragraph aloud from the novel they were studying. One by one. Standard practice. Most students stumbled over a word or two and moved on. When it reached Reuben, he found the right page. He found the right paragraph. He started reading. And then he stopped. Not because he did not know the words, he knew them. Soren could see his lips moving slightly, testing them silently first. He stopped because the words kept shifting. Soren could not see this directly, but he could see the result, the slight tilt of Reuben's head, the way his finger moved under the line and then lost its place, the way his breathing changed. Someone in the third row made a sound, not quite a laugh, something just below it. Reuben finished the paragraph. He got through it, but by the end, his voice was flat and careful in the way that meant he was concentrating entirely on not showing how much effort it cost. Soren did not say anything in class. Afterwards, in the cafeteria, he sat across from Reuben and asked a question. When you look at a page of text, he said, what does it look like to you? Reuben looked up. What? I am curious, Soren said. I want to know what you actually see, not what you are supposed to say you see. Reuben put his fork down. He was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that meant he was deciding whether to answer honestly or give the safe version. Letters move around, he said at last, like they cannot decide where they belong. Some words I have to read 4 or 5 times before they stay still long enough for me to understand them. The longer the sentence, the worse it gets. He said it without looking at Soren, like he was confessing something embarrassing. That is not a lack of intelligence, Soren said. Reuben gave him a flat look. Yeah, everyone says that. I'm not saying it to be kind, Soren said. I am saying it because it is literally true. You are processing language through a pattern recognition system that was built differently. It is slower for text because text is a human invention from about 5,000 years ago and the brain has not caught up with it yet. You process other patterns very well. I have watched you. Reuben stared at him. You have watched me. You navigated a social disagreement between 3 people at that table last week by changing the subject 3 times in 2 minutes without any of them noticing. That requires reading people, timing, and sequence. Your brain does that perfectly. It just does not do flat black text on white paper perfectly. Reuben was quiet. I learned differently, Soren said. In where I grew up, we did not use written text the way this system does. I had to find other ways in. I can show you some of them if you want. What kind of ways? Pattern-based, color association, reading with rhythm instead of with your eyes as the only tool. Soren paused. I cannot promise it will fix everything, but it might make the letters stay still a little longer. Rubin looked at him for a long time, long enough that Soren's emotional perception, that quiet awareness of the bioelectric field that every living creature carried, registered the shift, from guarded to something more careful and fragile than guarded. Hope, probably. Rubin was trying very hard not to let it show. Okay, Rubin said, sure, whatever. They met at lunch every day after that. Soren never called it tutoring. He just brought a book and a notebook, and they worked through it together, differently. Soren would read a line aloud first, with rhythm like a sentence was a small piece of music rather than a row of symbols. Then Rubin would try. Then Soren would ask him to draw the image the sentence put in his head, because Rubin's visual memory was extraordinary. It was slow, it was not magic, but something was happening. Nadia watched all of this from 2 tables over. She had a list in her notebook now. It was getting longer. She added a new item at the bottom. Knows how Rubin's brain works better than Rubin does. Asked how first. She underlined the last 2 words. Whatever Soren Vale was, he paid attention the way most people paid rent, because things fell apart if he stopped. Nobody asked Soren to fix anything. That was important. He was not supposed to be fixing things. He was supposed to be watching, documenting. The mission was observation, not intervention, and he had been very clear with himself about that boundary for the first 3 weeks. The problem was that the boundary kept presenting itself as a question rather than a wall. Week 5, a student named Danny sat alone at the far end of the cafeteria every day. He was 12, small for his age, and carried his lunch tray with both hands like he was afraid of dropping it. He sat with his back to the room, which was the kind of detail that told a complete story if you were paying attention. Soren was always paying attention. On Tuesday, he simply carried his own tray over and sat down across from Danny. No introduction, no explanation. He opened his book and read. Danny stared at him. "This table is empty," he said. "I know," Soren said. "Empty tables are usually quieter. I like quiet." Danny looked at him for a moment longer, then turned back to his food. Rubin found Soren at that table on Wednesday and sat down without asking why they had moved. By Thursday, there were 4 people at the table, none of them having made a deliberate decision to be there. By the following week, it was a table. Danny stopped sitting with his back to the room. Soren did not call attention to any of this. He went back to his usual seat the week after, and the table kept going without him. Nadia noticed. She also noticed the thing with the school paper. She had been running the Haverfield Herald for 8 months. The paper had 11 readers, most of them staff members who had been guilt-tripped into subscribing. Nadia wrote everything: opinion pieces, event coverage, a science column that she was fairly certain nobody read. One afternoon, Soren asked her what she was working on. "A piece about the art program budget cut," she said. "Nobody will read it." He looked at her notes. "What is the comparison figure to the sports budget?" She told him. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "That is a meaningful number, but the piece as you have framed it is an argument. Arguments make people defensive. What if it was just the numbers, laid out plainly, no conclusion, let the reader reach it themselves?" Nadia looked at him. "People resist being told what to think," Soren said, "but they find it very hard to resist a number that does not require explanation." She rewrote the piece that night, just the numbers, the art program's annual budget, the athletics budget, what had been cut and when, no opinion, no conclusion. Principal Darvesh read it on Friday morning. He did not say anything publicly. But on Monday, the art room had a new supply order pending, and the schedule for the spring fair had changed to include a student exhibition. Nadia stared at the notice board for a long time. She went looking for Soren. Meanwhile, in biology, Ms. Aldridge had started staying later than she needed to. It began because of a question Soren asked in class about deep-sea bioluminescence and why creatures in total darkness would evolve light in the first place. The answer led somewhere unexpected, and Ms. Aldridge found herself pulling out books she had not opened since university. She started leaving her marking on the back desk and working through it slowly with a pot of tea. It was the same thing she used to do before her husband died, back when the evening was something to settle into rather than survive. Soren stayed late on Tuesdays and Thursdays to use the biology room's reference library. He was quiet company. Sometimes they talked. He asked good questions, not the kind designed to impress, but the kind that came from genuine puzzlement. Why do humans build systems they know will outlast them? Why do some people find comfort in knowing they are small against a large universe, while others find it terrifying? She did not always have answers. That was fine. He seemed to find the not knowing interesting rather than disappointing. One evening she said, without really meaning to, "My husband used to ask questions like yours. He was always curious about the big shapes of things." Soren looked up from his book. What happened to him? "He died 2 years ago." "I am sorry," Soren said, not reflexively. He said it after a small pause that meant he was actually thinking about what it meant. "Thank you," she said. "It gets easier, slowly." He nodded. Slowly is still a direction. She thought about that sentence for the rest of the week. Back in his apartment on Thursday night, Soren sat with the crystalline recorder in his hands. He recorded his observation notes as usual: species behavior patterns, social group formation, the economics of teenage friendship. All clinical, all structured. Then he stopped the recording and sat there. The notes were getting harder to write, not because the observations were complicated, because they were about people he now knew by name, people whose patterns he understood not as data points, but as small pieces of who they were. He set the recorder down and picked it up again 3 times before he finally filed the entry and went to sleep. He did not think about the part of the mission plan that said, "No attachments." He thought about it a great deal, actually. He just did not write that part down. The fire started in a chemistry cabinet. Nobody was supposed to be in the lab at 4 p.m. on a Wednesday. It was the time between the last class and the after-school clubs when hallways were still and the building made its quiet ticking sounds. 2 students from the science club had stayed to finish an experiment. They were not supposed to be using the heating element unsupervised. They were 15 and curious, which was a combination that occasionally produced small disasters. This was one of them. Soren was in the reference room next door, returning 2 books, when the smell hit him. Not smoke yet, something below smoke, the early signature of something about to go very wrong. His senses caught it 12 seconds before the fire alarm did. He was through the door before he had thought it through. The cabinet was burning at the back of the lab. The 2 students were standing too close to it, frozen in that particular human stillness that meant their brains had not yet caught up with their feet. One of them was starting to cough. Soren moved. He crossed the room fast, too fast, the kind of fast that had no good explanation, and pulled both students toward the door by the arm, not roughly, but with complete certainty, the way you moved something when there was no time to ask permission. They were in the hallway when the fire suppression system triggered. A loud burst of sound and foam and pressure, and then a ringing silence. The alarm was still going. Soren stood in the hallway with 2 startled students, one of whom was still holding a pencil, and became aware of 2 things simultaneously. His left sleeve had torn at the shoulder during the movement, and Ms. Aldridge was at the far end of the hallway, having heard the alarm from the staff room. She was looking at his arm. For exactly 2 seconds, beneath the torn fabric, his shoulder was not the shoulder of a 15-year-old student. It was something else. Scales the color of deep ocean and old gold. They caught the fluorescent light and held it for a moment longer than they should have. Then the bioshift shell reknit itself, and the sleeve was just a sleeve again. Soren pulled it straight and turned to check on the students, who had seen nothing because they were staring at the lab door and processing whether they were in trouble. He did not look at Ms. Aldridge. She did not say anything. She walked the 2 students to the office, and the fire brigade came, and there was a great deal of paperwork and a longer conversation about unsupervised lab access. Through all of it, Ms. Aldridge did not mention what she had seen in the hallway. She also did not stop thinking about it for the rest of the evening. The next morning she watched Soren in class, not with suspicion, exactly, with the careful attention of someone trying to look at a thing properly rather than assuming they already understood it. He answered questions. He asked better ones. He helped Ruben untangle a diagram they were supposed to label. He was exactly the same as he always was. Which was, she was beginning to understand, its own kind of impossible. Nadia found Soren in the library at lunch and slid a folder across the table. Astronomy database, she said. Public access. I have been cross-checking orbital data for a school project, and I found a signal log that does not match any registered satellite, any known research station, or any debris field on record. Soren looked at the folder without touching it. It is a very small signal, Nadia said. Consistent position, moves in a pattern. It has been there since late September. She paused. That is when you arrived. He was quiet. I am not going to print it, she said. I have not told anyone. I just want to know what it is. Soren picked up the folder and looked at the data inside. He turned a page. His expression did not change, but Nadia watched the color shift in his eyes, that gold-brown something that was never quite the same twice. It is a positioning marker, he said, used by vessels that maintain distance from ground-based detection systems. Nadia's voice was very steady. Is it yours? The library was quiet around them. Someone returned a book at the front desk. A radiator clicked. Soren set the folder down. He did not answer, but he did not look away from her either, which was, she realized, also an answer. That night he picked up the crystalline recorder and started his usual entry. He got 3 sentences in before he stopped. He sat for a long time in the quiet apartment, holding the recorder, watching the city lights outside the window. Somewhere in his chest, not literally, the bioshift shell had anatomy that roughly approximated human structure. It was not precise. Something had shifted in the last few weeks into a shape he had not planned for. Something that made the observation notes feel like writing postcards from a place you were trying to pretend you were not homesick for. He set the recorder on the table. His phone, the human device, the one he had learned to use and had grown genuinely fond of, lit up with a message from Ruben. Hey, you okay? You seem weird today. Weirder than usual, lol. He typed back, I am reconsidering a decision I made a long time ago. 3 seconds passed. Yeah, that tracks for a Tuesday. Soren read that message 4 times. Then he put the phone face down on the table and sat there a little longer. He was not good at this, any of this. He was not supposed to be. The gymnasium was empty at 5:30 on a Friday. The last sports practice had cleared out 20 minutes earlier, and the only light came from the high windows along the west wall, the kind of pale yellow light that autumn afternoons made when they were winding down. The bleachers were folded back. The floor still had the squeak marks from sneakers. Nadia was sitting in the middle of the 3rd row up when Soren came through the side door. He stopped when he saw her, just for a moment. Then he walked over and sat down on the bench below hers and turned slightly so he could see her face. You asked me to meet you here, he said. I did. She had her notebook, but it was closed. That was deliberate. I am not going to record this. I am not going to print it. I just want you to tell me the truth. He waited. Nadia took a breath. The positioning marker, the way you moved in the chemistry lab, and do not tell me you were just fast, because I have watched sprinters and you were not moving the way they move. The leaf on the first day, the way you already knew how Ruben's brain worked before you asked him to describe it. The questions you ask that are always about one more level down than anyone else is looking. She paused. The fact that you have not blinked in the last 2 minutes. He blinked. I know, she said. You just did it on purpose. He looked at her for a long moment, and then something in his posture changed, not much, just a slight release of the careful precision he always held himself to. Like putting down something heavy that he had been carrying so long he had stopped noticing the weight. "What do you want to know?" he asked. "Everything you can tell me." So he told her, not all of it. Some things did not translate. Some things were too large for a gymnasium on a Friday evening, but the shape of it, a civilization very far from Earth, very old, very cautious, a young member of that civilization who disagreed with the caution, an unauthorized visit, a plan that was supposed to be clean. "I was going to observe," he said, "document, write a report about human behavior patterns and social structures, leave no trace." "That was the plan," Nadia said. "That was the plan. And then—" He was quiet. The gymnasium settled around them. Somewhere outside, a car started and drove away. "And then Reuben dropped his tray," he said. Nadia looked at him. "That is genuinely when it started," he said. "It is embarrassing. I had been here 6 hours. I helped him pick up his bread rolls and he said my name back to me, and it was the first time in 100 years anyone had said my name without it being a formal address. And it was just Reuben, not worried about what I was or where I ranked, just talking." Nadia said nothing. She was listening in the way she listened when something important was being said, and she did not want to interrupt the middle of it. "I do not think your kind understands what you do to people," Soren said. "To other species, you just care, immediately, without checking first whether the thing you are caring about deserves it or is safe to care about. You do not calculate, you just include." "That gets us into a lot of trouble," Nadia said. "I know I have it in several reports." He looked down at his hands. "I also have 3 months of notes on a crystalline recording device that I have not transmitted because they stopped being objective somewhere around week 2, and I could not find a way to fix that." Nadia sat with that for a moment. Then she said the thing she had been working up to since the folder in the library. "I could print this story. It would be real, verifiable. It would be the most important thing the school paper has ever published, possibly the most important thing any paper has ever published." She looked at him steadily. "I am not going to." He looked up. "Not because I do not think people should know eventually," she said, "but because you came here alone and you did something kind with the time you had, and I do not think the right response to that is to make it a headline." She paused. "And because you are my friend, I think, am I your friend?" Soren did not answer immediately. His eyes did the thing where the color shifted, and Nadia had learned by now that this meant he was feeling something and having trouble sorting it. "Yes," he said, "I think you are the first one I have had. It is strange. I did not expect the word to feel like anything in particular." "Does it?" "Yes," he did not say what. The light through the west windows had gone thin and blue. Nadia stood up and stretched. "So," she said, "what are you going to do now?" "I have to leave," he said. The form I am wearing has limits. I have pushed it farther than I should have already." "When?" "End of semester, 2 weeks." She nodded, then something occurred to her. "The report you have not sent, the 3 months of notes." He said nothing. "Send it," she said. "Not the clean version, the real one, whatever it turned into." She picked up her notebook. "If you came here to tell them what we are like, tell them what we are actually like." He was still looking at her when she walked to the door. "Nadia," he said. She stopped. "Thank you," he said, "for not running." She considered that. "You picked up Reuben's bread rolls," she said. "What did you think we were going to do?" "The last day of term was a Friday, and it rained." "Not heavily." "The kind of rain that falls sideways and makes every window in a building look like it is thinking about something sad." Haverfield Secondary went through its last half-day with the particular noise of students who knew they were about to be free, lockers slamming, shoes squeaking, the background hum of 200 people who had somewhere better to be. Soren moved through all of it for the last time. He had memorized the building weeks ago, but he walked it slowly now, differently, not cataloging, just looking, the crack in the wall near the water fountain that someone had drawn a small flower over, the notice board where Nadia's budget piece was still pinned, slightly crooked, the east staircase with its creaking third step. He had a list of things to do before the end of the day. He went to the office first and asked to speak with Principal Darvish. Darvish was a man who had been in education for 26 years and had the expression of someone who remembered why they started, but sometimes had trouble finding it beneath the paperwork. He looked up when Soren came in and gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Leaving us today, I hear," Darvish said. "Yes," Soren said. "I wanted to say something before I go." Darvish waited. "This school is doing something that is harder than it looks," Soren said. "I have been watching it for 3 months. The students here are learning to carry weight together, not just curriculum, the other kind, the kind that does not have a syllabus. They are learning to notice each other." He paused. "I think the people who built that are the teachers. I think you built most of it. I wanted someone to tell you that before you forgot to believe it." Darvish was quiet for a long moment. "That is a very mature observation for a 15-year-old, he said. "I am older than I look," Soren said. He shook Darvish's hand and left. Rubin's locker was near the science wing. Soren slipped the letter through the vent at the top, the long way folded into thirds. He had written it by hand, actual pen on paper, which had been difficult. He had underestimated how hard it was to make a pen do what he wanted. The letter was 3 pages. It said, in careful and slightly formal language, that Rubin Walsh was one of the most perceptive people Soren had met in 3 months of watching hundreds of people very closely. It said that his mind moved like water, not in straight lines, but always towards something, and always finding a way through. It said that the reading would keep getting easier, and that the difficulty had never been about intelligence, and Soren hoped eventually Rubin would stop measuring himself against a skill that had been invented 5,000 years ago and had nothing to do with how well a mind worked. The last line said, "You were good company, I will not forget it." Ms. Aldridge was alone in her classroom, packing books into a bag. She did not hear him come to the door. He left the folded note on her desk and turned to go, and then she said, without looking up, "I know you are there, Soren." He stopped. She kept packing. "I am not going to ask you to explain what I saw in the hallway," she said. "I have spent 2 weeks deciding whether I trust what I saw, and I have decided that I do. I am also deciding that it is yours to explain when and if you want to, not mine to demand." He was quiet. She finally looked up. "Are you going to be all right?" Nobody had asked him that. Not in the way she asked it, not as a formality, but as a real question about whether he would be okay in the specific, practical sense of the word. "I think so," he said. "Are you?" She considered it honestly. "I think I am starting to be," she said, slowly. "Slowly is still a direction," he said. She smiled. He had said that to her 2 months ago, and she had thought about it almost every day since. "Go on," she said. "Safe travels, wherever you are going." That evening, in the apartment, Soren sat with the crystalline recorder. He had rewritten the report 4 times in the last 2 weeks. It was not what he had planned to write in September. It was not clean or structured or defensible in the way the Sovereignty Council would expect. It was 3 months of watching people carry their lives, and it had gotten into him despite everything. He recorded the final version without stopping. It said humans are not what we assumed. They are not simply impulsive or sentimental or brief. They are brief, and they know it, and they build things anyway. They form attachments before checking whether the thing they are attaching to is safe. They make tables for the person eating alone. They clap for a boy who reads a paragraph after trying for 2 months. They do not ask what something is before deciding to care about it. The final line of the report said, "I do not recommend contact on the Council's current terms. I recommend humility. Any civilization that meets this one should be prepared to be changed by it. I arrived here as an observer. I am leaving as something they made. I cannot calculate what that is worth. I only know that it cost me my objectivity, and I would make the same choice again." He transmitted it at midnight. The signal rose from the rooftop, silent, and was gone. At 11 the next morning, on the roof of her apartment building, Nadia watched a light move slowly across the sky. Too slow for anything human, too deliberate. It held in one position for almost 30 seconds. Then it moved and accelerated and was gone. She stood there in the cold for a while longer. She did not take her notebook out. She did not write it down. Some things did not need to be a story. Some things could just be true.